Hello and welcome to another episode of The Scramble. I'm your host, Sarah Montes de Oca. Thank you for joining us. Today we will discuss Brian Williams' suspension in comparison to the public reaction to Hillary Clinton's similar incident. We will also discuss whether or not the United States should send arms to Ukraine to help fight the Russian-backed separatists. And finally, we will discuss a proposed law here in Nevada that would extend the amount of time that veterans are permitted to get in-state tuition under the GI Bill. Before we dive in, let me introduce our panel. First, we have James Schaefer, sophomore in journalism, David Sarabian, a senior in political science. We also have Elsha Harris Yolanda, a sophomore in English and broadcast and journalism, and Peter Nicholas Stefano, a junior in journalism. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Brian Williams has been suspended from NBC for 6 months after revelations that he lied about taking hostile fire in a helicopter while embedded with troops during the Iraq War. In 2008, Hillary Clinton similarly stated that during a trip to Bosnia, the then First Lady was shot at by snipers and under duress. She later said that she misspoke after video evidence came forward that disproved her story. Why did Hillary Clinton receive a slap on the wrist when she was running for president, but Brian Williams has been suspended for essentially the same thing? So who wants to start?
I'll go ahead.
James?
First off, I'd like to say I am one of the biggest fans of Brian Williams. But that being said, I do not think that lying in the journalism field has any sort of leniency for that position. I mean, Brian Williams is a part of a seat of power that's been a part of this country for 60 years. Chet Huntley, David Brinkley, and more famously, Tom Brokaw have cemented that seat into what it is today, a seat that demands the respect from its audience in its reports and stories. But that being said, I don't think that Brian Williams lying there is no leniency when it comes to how we should view Brian Williams' position. And by saying that, I'm saying that his suspension, I think, is adequate. It is a sufficient penalty for Brian Williams that when he does come back, and I sure hope he comes back because I do miss him. I love who is it? I forgot the name of the anchor that's currently on, but I love him. But that being said, I do not think that a journalist who reports with intent to inform by misleading without correction is different than a journalist who reports with intent to inform and corrects his misleadings immediately. That's to say, on January 30th, when Brian Williams did tell the story, he was then on the next day asked on Twitter about the story by a soldier. 4 days later, he completely took off the story, said I had misremembered and it was incorrect. I think that's what a good journalist does. A good journalist doesn't stew in the, I don't know, I don't remember, this story could be right or could be wrong. He did the right thing, and if anything, I think he's been handling this amazingly. The penalty, I believe, is sufficient, and I can't wait for Brian Williams to come back.
I'll respond to that.
Go ahead, Peter.
That misremember, that's a bunch of baloney. I don't buy it. I think, he's been lying all the time. They caught him in many lies.
Sure.
And of course, he's a great reporter, but he shouldn't come back as a newsman. I don't think. I mean,
So what, is he going to come back as the intern?
Well, come back as a comedian. I mean, come on, this guy's over
So
here
you think
saying.
his credibility?
I think it's shot. The
The
6 months is a cover-up. There's no way this guy's coming back.
You think he should be then?
Well, I
completely
understand the
fired?
6 months because they should do a thorough investigation, but he definitely should go. I mean, definitely. That's just a terrible lie. Say he's done under fire. As far as Hillary Clinton, there's no way that she should be under a different standard. She should be ashamed of herself. I don't know how you can run for president or any office and just lie about being under fire from the military. And they do put her to a different standard. It's a bunch of malarkey.
I think there's two things we should consider with that point. The first is that Hillary Clinton is still not a nominee for the presidential candidacy, and hence so is still an ordinary person that is able to lie.
Come on.
Now listen.
Able to lie?
Well, don't we all?
She's running for president.
She's running for president.
Okay, well, until she becomes a nominee, then we start questioning her position and all the positions that she has. And that's to say the platform that she runs on. And my second point is that we're taking this argument to a very foolish extent in saying that since he lies about everything. This is not Stephen Glass.
They caught him in a bunch of stuff. Come on,
What's the bunch of stuff?
They caught him.
You're saying that
they
16
caught him in a
years
bunch of things, and these words they're using, misspoken and misremembered.
Right.
Come on, why don't you just be the point? I lied.
You're saying
I
that
made
three
it up.
lies represents the entirety of his career, which I think is absolutely foolish. I mean, think of it
He
this way.
ruined it.
What did he ruin? His career?
It wasn't even a news story. If you go back to the news footage, he says, this helicopter took RPG fire, showed the damage.
Hey.
Then a few days later, he's like, "Oh, we were under duress. We were shots
It's
coming
like an
at us
8-year-old.
from all
Did-
directions."
did
with
he
A-
recant it?
with
Did he
AK
recant
fire.
it?
Daily, of course he had to.
He recently recanted it, but it wasn't a news story that he was
Yeah.
bragging about. He was trying to have the war stories that every single journalist that's been to a war zone wants to have.
So
we were
since-
taking fire, and it wasn't a news story. So his credibility professionally shouldn't necessarily be in question, especially because if you look at it at the time that he reported correctly. But when he's on late night comedy shows
Letterman.
and he's bragging about it, then that's a separate story.
But
now to call a position of power,
Sure.
come on, James, that's a stretch. That's laughing.
I want to hear what Elsha has to say. What do you think, Elsha?
You guys definitely have. I think in this profession, your credibility and your reputation is everything. I do think the suspension was a little bit taken, like 6 months, come on. I do understand that as a journalist, we're held to a different standard because we are supposed to be these heralders of truth and information and give it to the people. I don't think that he should not be allowed to come back because I know a lot of people were talking about that also. I think he does, especially what he's done for the profession. This one incident,
You think 6 months isn't enough, or it's too little?
it's too long.
Oh, come on.
Absolutely.
He's not even going to come back. Never mind. He's lucky he got 6
Absolutely.
months.
Look,
Absolutely too long.
So he twisted a story, and it was a story that he told, personally, not professionally.
I don't care.
Not to mention, okay, and I understand the viewpoint, especially because he's on Nightly News Hour, and because they are the public airwaves, they are by federal law required to have that as part of a public service, as part of a public good, and he is the face of that public good. Now, compared to Hillary Clinton, political speech is the most protected out of any speech. You, legally speaking, could say, let's kick out all of the immigrants. You could say that politically. If you're a political candidate, you can say that because that's a political position, as wild and out there as it is. But Hillary Clinton, she had the same story, and the video came out at the time in 2008 that she wasn't undressed. She was hugging children at the time. And she got a slap on the wrist, I think, just because she was a presidential candidate. And like a heralder of truth, they have this really high standard for people that are journalists. And journalists make mistakes. Journalists want to seem cool.
Well, it comes with the credibility. What do you think? I mean, do they want to get the news out faster or more accurate? What's more important? And
accurate.
These days it's faster, especially with Twitter. But Brian Williams, what we're talking about, the context of what we're talking about, is we're talking about a story that he could brag about. And you even look at his body language, and he has this almost not necessarily narcissistic, but egocentric, flowery, well, when I was doing this, when we were taking fire. And it's like, dude, no.
It's dramatic.
Sensationalism.
He's being too dramatic, and he's trying to make himself bigger than he is. I don't
yeah.
feel sorry for him. He should retire. He made plenty of money. I would never trust that guy in the news again. It's ridiculous.
To go back to your previous point, David, about your Laffy Taffy argument, I suggest you chew on this. Chew on this. And now, the 2 points we should look at. The first is that you're saying he's retelling these stories in a very boisterous nature on David Letterman. Of course. But here's my question. If he's on David Letterman, is he a journalist or is he a celebrity?
He's still a journalist, though. He's representing the
So
news.
you're asking this man to be a journalist 24/7 every day of his life and never to tell a lie.
You're not supposed to be joking about being shot under fire.
How can you ask a human being?
He wasn't joking about it.
Well, he was bragging
How
about
can
it,
you ask
rather.
a human being to be, for 24/7 of his life, to be a journalist and never lie? You can ask that of a human being. And go to your second point, I'd like to say that we are looking at politicians and journalists at a very different perspective. The first I'd like to point out.
Shouldn't.
Well, but
Shouldn't.
here's.
They
But
should be.
I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm saying that we do. And by that, I'm saying
we?
us as an American
I don't.
community.
He's right. We do.
Then,
Who's we, though? You can say we. I don't know who the we is.
The public.
Let's say the audience for this example I'm about to point out. Paul Ryan, during his candidacy as vice presidential candidate, came out and said that I ran a marathon and I did it in under an hour.
Yeah.
When it came out that he didn't, then we're taking
He'd be dead if it was under an hour.
we're taking the same argument in that he lied about this, so he'll lie about everything.
Well, you will. If you lie about one thing, you could possibly
you've
lie
never
about
lied.
everything.
Have you ever lied?
Yes, of course.
So
Have
that
you
that
ever
means
I'm not going to lie about a marathon and getting shot under fire. I'm
here's
just not.
here's the fallacy then. If you have lied once, then the argument we are making is that you have lied about everything and you will continue to lie by telling one single lie. And I think that's something that we can't hold as a standard for journalists or politicians at all. That is completely
There are
inhuman.
people that don't make up stories, and there's better people out there. I don't believe that these, I don't
I mean,
know why
even
they have
President
psychological problems.
Even
to make
President
up the stories.
Obama, as much as people have been
Sure.
criticized him, he said, "I quit smoking," and then what? A month later,
Right.
there's photos of him smoking cigarettes
This is something
outside
we
the
should
White
take
House.
into account for journalists. We
Well,
want,
I don't mind that
we
one.
want, we want
Well,
perfect.
I don't mind.
We want perfect journalists, but perfection is unattainable. But we should always try. And
Yeah,
I
we
think that's
should
what
try,
Brian
I
Williams
agree.
is doing. He is trying. For the love of God, he's trying.
How do you mean he's trying? What has
He's-
he done to try?
it was
He
a
hasn't-
self- it was a
What has he
self-imposed-
done to try?
He's had a career for quite
I'm
some
talking
time.
about since he got caught. What has he done to try?
This suspension is
Has
self-imposed.
he come out? Has he come out? He didn't go on David Letterman for the
He
showing
should
that
have
he was
went out.
supposed
He
to.
should have went out and kicked it in the butt. He should have better PR people. He should have went out instead of hiding and talking about it. I would have went right out and just talked about this right away.
Well, coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Well, they don't have good public relations people, either him or Hillary. Hillary, this Bosnia thing, that kills me. That happened in 1994. Sure. Anybody that's running her PR campaign should have came out and talked about this before, because now this is going to be a subject now. So whoever she's got in charge, got to go.
Right.
All right. Well, Elsa, do you want to finish up with anything, or?
I think they handled that enough.
All right.
In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father. The odds of that same boy then making it to the US and European Pro Golf Tours, 1 in 7 million. The odds of the Big Easy winning the US Open twice, 1 in 1.2 billion. The odds of him having a child diagnosed with autism, 1 in 88. Ernie Els encourages you to learn the signs of autism.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. Got it.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early. You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Moving on to our next topic. One of the biggest national debates has been whether to provide Ukraine with weapons. A bipartisan group of senators, as well as top U.S. officials, have advised that providing billions of dollars in weapons is needed to help fight the Russian-backed separatists. Others have stated that this assistance will escalate the asymmetric conflict between the U.S. and Russia. Will Russia escalate the situation if the U.S. sends weapons? And how will Russia respond to U.S. action? Peter, go ahead.
I'm looking this over here. We got to give them $1 billion for their first year and $1 billion the next 2 years. Before I saw this number, I was going to say go help them. I don't think we should be giving them. And you know it says $3 billion. You know it really means maybe like $30 billion. Listen, they have $3 billion here over 3 years. You know it's going to be more than that. For that kind of money, I think we should help them. But there should, I hate to say it like that way, there should be a cap on the money. There's no way we should be giving them $3 billion. That's in another neighborhood. The people that live in that neighborhood, those countries should be helping more with the money. This country's going broke. It's going to be like Greece, and they give them $3 billion, and it's really going to be $30 billion. And then, you know, and first, what they should do, the countries over there, they should have a powwow with Putin. Really, I mean, this is going to escalate when we're fighting Russia again. Yeah. This is ridiculous to go on and on, the same type of fights.
So you think it's too much that we should help?
I think we somehow should help them, but not give them all this money. We can't afford to give them. We're going to end up having no money. That money could go to better things. And I think the United Nations should come to the table for once. It's the terrible United Nations. No one ever does anything. They all should be gone. Really, these people are ridiculous. You have in these positions. I think we should help them. I think we should get some kind of powwow together. And I think the money's too much.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank
but
you.
I agree on different points, though. I think my main question that I pose towards the audience and to this table today is, when have more guns brought more stability? I mean, honestly,
no, you're right.
I can't see this as a reasonable conclusion for the United States to have. But nonetheless, I believe that it is a debate that we should talk about. I mean, the United States is on the world stage, and because of that, we are demanded to have an opinion on every single world conflict and every single world event. And I think our voice should starkly respond to the rest of the world that we will help diplomatically. But I don't think that we should step in with arms foot soldiers, tanks, any sort of funding for any sort of military capabilities, because that only increases the problem. I mean, you're going to see American guns in the hands of Ukrainian soldiers fighting against with pro-Russian separatists with Russian guns.
Exactly.
And honestly, if you want to look this for what it is a Russia and a U.S. funding battle, if that's what it came to, if we did fund. And if we look at the absolute horrendous circumstances these people are in, I hope to God that the people of Russia will see what is happening. I mean, I think that the majority of the pressure should go on the people of Russia for things like these Russian mothers who are being given death certificates of their soldier sons and being told that they died in a training exercise and they died while being deployed to a different part of the country.
They don't know what to do. They're not empowered. What are they going to do? I feel bad for them too. Seems like they have no power. They're scared of Vladimir Putin.
Right. And you know, to borrow from a different quote, when we look at how the Russians view Putin, the current standard, they're scared of them, but also it's kind of like...
He's a scary guy.
Right. Borrow from a quote from the New York Times, they said that it's kind of like Rudy Giuliani when he was a tough, iron-fisted man. To New Yorkers, he was iron-fisted. But he was an SOB, but he was their SOB. That's what Putin is to the Russians currently. He is claiming land and making and lengthening the responsibilities of Russian hegemony. But to say that is to say that they are starting to go into territory of, let's call for right now, uncharted waters, areas that are increasing their sphere of influence to places that we should not allow. But we should stop it diplomatically.
James, you're assuming
yes, sir.
that is a new sphere of influence. A lot of Russian politicians do not view Ukraine as being separate from Russia. They do not view Moldova as being separate from Russia. They do not believe Belarus is separate from Russia. Sure. They don't believe that any of the advanced peoples, which is basically the historically Christian people in the Soviet Union, including Armenia, Hungary, and other countries, are not Russian.
Right.
They want the Russian Empire back. They lost their pride at the end.
Yeah.
They lost their pride at the end of the Cold War, and a lot of people are thinking, and even I've heard some Brookings scholars say this, especially like Stephen Pfeiffer, Michael O'Hanlon, talking about negotiating with Putin. A lot of people aren't keeping the end game in mind. Putin wants all of his toys back. He wants his empire back.
Yeah.
And you think he isn't willing to risk and sacrifice millions of his own people to achieve that end? The Russians lost 24 million people in the Great Patriotic War, what they call World War II. They are used to people dying and suffering and sacrificing, and they will do it to get their pride back.
Do you think we should have then?
As far as sending arms to Ukraine is only going to escalate the conflict. Putin already sees this as a proxy war, just like Afghanistan, but it's a new type of asymmetric conflict. Right. And if we send arms, it's going to escalate. And honestly, Putin's going to respond somehow, and it's probably going to keep on escalating. Now, the question is whether or not we want to win on this front with Ukraine, because it's always going to move to another front. There's going to be a new country that Putin's going to go to. This happened in Georgia.
If we do win, it will never be a U.S. win.
A U.S. win? What do you mean a U.S. win? We can win. Do you know what it would take to stop this? What it would take to stop this completely?
At what cost?
Did
we win in Afghanistan? Did we win in Iraq? Did we win in
honestly,
Vietnam?
you want to know the cost that would stop Russia? Probably a world war.
Elsha, what do you think?
It's fiscally not responsible, I think, for the United States to keep sending money to all these places. Russia is already going into it, well, Putin and Russia are going into it with this mindset. They don't care. They will do whatever it takes to win. They will stop at nothing. And I think by us sending more guns, that will escalate the situation, obviously, even more. Do I think that sending a diplomat to talk to Putin or kind of handle it from a diplomatic front will work? We can try, but do I think it's going to work? Absolutely not.
Have you seen Putin in these photos? They have body
they
have body language experts.
Sure.
You see Putin snickering at any time that there's a peace treaty. It's just he's just going to the last ceasefire in the few days before it took effect. The Russian-backed separatists just used it as, okay, we've got 2 days to take the strategic towns before we know the ceasefire is going to fall apart.
To get my last,
it's just a tool.
To get my last point on escalating the conflict, I mean, I want to borrow from another very great quote. I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but I know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. If we escalate this conflict, we are going to find a result that is irreparably.
And it is that fear that the American people have that is what Russia is counting on. honestly, because if a nuclear war breaks out, a lot of people are going to die, but it will not be the end of civilization. Just because Albert Einstein developed the formula and made that quote doesn't mean that he was right. He was a scientist, not a
What do you
strategic
consider
planner.
a civilized society? A society that's been destroyed by nuclear weapons 3 times over? How is that even recognizable to what we see?
All right. You really want to get into that?
Sure.
You really want to get into that? Do you know what most of the nukes the United States uses are for in a nuclear conflict? We have a rule. We send 2 nukes out for every enemy nuclear strategic target that we hit, which means that we could really hit it with half the nukes. Most of the nuclear weapons that we use that both sides use, is to take out the strategic nuclear weapons that each side has. And there's this whole misnomer that, oh, nuclear weapons are going to reign over cities. There are towns that are strategic and towns that are not. Do you really think Russia is going to send a nuke to Toledo, Ohio? No. New York, because it's a strategic target culturally, as well as LA? Yeah, definitely Washington,
And what
D.C.
happens after the radiation clouds pour over Dayton, Ohio, and destroy the crops, and we're not able to grow food? What happens when the waters that we fish in with irradiated fish that we can't eat, our hair's starting to fall out, and our skin's starting to come off?
Because
if you want to look at what civilized society is, that's not civilized society.
The United States is the only country to use nuclear weapons in a conflict, and that was World War II. And we took out 2 cities in Japan, and life goes on. Somewhere in the world, life will go on. And the Russians, with their vast territories, with their railroad networks, with all the nukes that they have hiding there, they are planning to live past this. And the United States is unfortunately so stopped in fear of any type of nuclear weapons being used in a conflict, including nuclear weapons, that they are just completely in shock and fear of it. And yet, if you talk to the planners that have to do it at the strategic level, they're thinking, we have this many tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, we have this many strategic nuclear weapons, here's the levels that we can use them. The American public is steeped in fear about nuclear weapons, but unfortunately, not everybody. Putin is not in fear of it.
Not Putin, but the regular people in those countries, I'm sure
regular people in those countries. And the thing is, it's the strategic planners of the country that make those decisions about how weapons are used. And they have to start counting the bodies of how many people are going to be left. And you know what? When it comes down to it, and they've done assessments in the military, that the U.S. would actually do pretty well in nuclear conflict. A lot of people would die, but we do well.
We have to move on to our next topic, but we will see what decision President Obama makes.
I hope not. I hope it goes to somebody else.
Moving on to our next topic. The Nevada Board of Regents has proposed a law that would allow veterans and their families under the GI Bill to get in-state tuition for up to 3 years after a veteran's discharge or death in combat. Currently, the law allows for only 2 years. Is this really worth a rule change, or are 2 or 3 years not enough for the sacrifice that soldiers have made?
This is absolutely ridiculous that there is a time limit on this. I come from a huge military family. I cannot believe that people would go to this country, fight for this country on the front lines, come back. A lot of the times they don't come back as themselves. And to say, oh, well, I know you're going through PTSD, but you only have 3 years to use this, so you might want to, figure it out. That's absolutely a slap in their face. And to their families, I could not even imagine. It's ridiculous.
Especially because the UNLV professes to be such a military-friendly school. Yeah. And we're what, top 20, top 15, top 10 in it. And then it's just only 2 or 3 years. And it's in-state tuition. And veterans are a part of the UNLV community, but they're not an incredibly massive part. How much of lost tuition would there actually be by granting this? I don't think there would be that much, especially because this 3 year would be 50% more than what they're expecting. Now, if this is under the GI Bill, and you have a certain amount of time to use the GI Bill, so this isn't, I went to war in Korea or Vietnam or Persian Gulf I, and I'm going to start cashing in on it. This is the GI Bill. This is a limited time frame that when you start using it, it starts getting activated. So this isn't just some carte blanche, you can use it 30 years from now for in-state tuition.
And to delve deeper into this bill and not just break past the crust that is the 3 year extension, if you go into the conditions, they're absolutely hilarious. First, you must contribute $100 per month for the first 12 months of your tour, and those payments must be made for all 12 months and can't be canceled once they're begun. And there's no refund of that $1,200 ever. You never get a refund. And additionally, you must receive an honorable discharge, and that's something that 20% of all veterans don't get.
Well, honorable discharge, that's different. If you get dishonorably discharged, in a lot of ways, that's worse than getting convicted of a felony.
Not all circumstances are the same when it comes to dishonorable discharge.
It's still a status, though.
Sure.
dishonorable discharge, you could get that for assaulting your superior officer.
Does that person not deserve an education, though?
James, I think for the people that have a military background, or at least family with a military background,
Sure.
people that get dishonorably discharged
Yes.
really mess up to get that.
Right, but they're paying
I
$100
mean-
a month beforehand on that. So if you're going to say that they're not getting a refund and 20% of the
Well,
the
you're
military
talking about
personnel-
$1,200. Right now, I'm talking about the honorable versus dishonorable
sure, okay.
discharge. If you've gotten an honorable discharge, that's pretty much don't do anything too bad while you're in the military.
Okay.
Okay, dishonorable discharged, that's a whole completely different deal. That's what people that go to jail in the military get.
Okay.
All right,
Peter,
so
what do you think? What do you think? Do you think we should grant longer term for them, or is
Yes,
it
I
2
think
year?
it shouldn't be limited. And I'd like to know who wrote the bill that says it is limited. And those provisions you're talking about, I think they put those in there because they don't want to spend the money. But they'll give Hillary Clinton, when they give her $300,000 to come over here and talk. They'll give her $300,000, but then they don't want to do that.
okay,
Right.
those funds were private for Hillary Clinton. This is a public endeavor.
Okay, it had to do with the school, though, right?
Has to do with the school,
Yeah,
yeah.
all I know is that whoever wrote that in the
Right.
bill, that tells me they don't really want them.
But even
to
then,
go to
this is an
school.
extension of what was already there. So this is at least a step to extending it, although I think it seems like the consensus here on the panel is that it doesn't go as far as we'd
Yeah,
like.
why
Right.
3 years? That, why not just make it
And not only that, the
open-ended?
conditions need to be changed and for those soldiers. And to touch back on what you were saying about dishonorable discharge, although that is a valid argument you're making, I'm making the argument that still that's 20% of the soldiers in the military. I don't think that they don't deserve an education.
I could be wrong, but
Hopefully
dishonorably
they-
discharged veterans don't get a GI Bill.
Hopefully they will get
Yeah.
not dishonorable soldiers, but we'll hopefully grant them the extension of over 2 years. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Share your opinions and any ideas, topics you would like us to discuss to Scramble about at thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at UNLV.TV. From all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.